I'm a 28-year-old man currently hiding under my covers like I'm 6. I'm petrified and completely mentally lost while holding my phone so close to my face that it's nearly touching my nose. I'm out of answers. How can this be happening? I don't know what to do at this point. I'm going to copy and paste something from my notes in the hopes that afterwards, someone can help me, can save me. The following is a recounting of events that took place 6 years ago. I never shared what happened to me with anyone even after writing it all out. But now, I figure this is my last shot at salvation. I'm a very light sleeper, and last night I was awoken by my bed shaking. It startled me slightly until I saw that my 13-pound black cat had jumped on the bed. I live alone. Every now and then I forget that he's sharing my apartment with me. A freeloader, of course. I quickly drifted back to sleep after giving him a few pets. My cat is a rescue. I adopted him a little over a year ago. A large black cat with big yellow and orange-colored eyes. He looked like your textbook Halloween cat. Right after I got him, I had him checked by a vet, and they told me he was about 9 or 10 years old. Not an ancient cat, but closer to a middle-aged man in cat years and in good health aside from being a little hefty. "Ready for your food, Lardo?" I asked as I sat up in bed. I didn't actually name him that, though he hears Lardo, fat man, big OL guy, or gato, more than his actual name. I renamed him Whale, after adopting him simply because that's what he is, a land whale. He didn't meow back at me and instead just trotted over to the kitchen in front of the cabinet where an endless supply of food seemed to come from every day. Whale isn't a very vocal cat. You'd see other cats that would meow back in response to their owners in person or in movies and shows. He would still make noise from time to time, but it was more of a squeak, like metal wheels on an old office chair in desperate need of some WD-40. I mean this in an endearing way, of course. His meows are almost similar to a person that has lost their voice due to being ill or from shouting too much. Not no noise, but a very faint and sharp effort of audio. I gave him half a can of his wet food and placed it in a cat bowl next to his bowl of dry food that he has access to 24/7. He doesn't always eat his wet food, but today it seemed like he was looking forward to it all night. I then made myself breakfast and laid back in bed waiting until it was time to leave. Whale hopped up on my bed looking like he wanted attention. I patted my chest to beckon him over to me. He came and stood on my chest, purring loudly. He looked at me for a second and then flopped over. He's certainly not a very graceful cat. Most cats would methodically gently lay down. He sorta just finds his spot, goes limp, and lets gravity do the rest. I usually have to put an arm up against him so that he doesn't slide off. He sprawled out across me. I finished my food and headed off to classes a few minutes later. I'm currently a first-year college student in my second semester. The fall semester just started last week. Over the summer, I was able to move into my first apartment. It's pretty small, but big enough for me and a cat. It's in a good-sized building with 16 apartments in total. I'm on the 3rd floor, the top floor, with one neighbor next to me and 2 neighboring apartments across the hall. The layout is the same on each floor, and there is also a subfloor with apartments as well. To give a brief description of my apartment, if you were to walk in the front door, you would already get like 75% of the tour. Since my apartment is tiny, I put my bed in the living room next to the front door as it was too big to fit comfortably in the actual bedroom. At the foot of the bed is half of an L-shaped sectional couch facing the TV on the wall. There are big windows to the right of my bed and couch that open sideways and outward like a door. There's paint smears on them and no screens, the true landlord special. I finished my classes for the day and came home in the evening to Whale laying on the exact couch cushion he was on when I left, spread out like a damn crime scene. I've never even seen him loaf, like most cats do by tucking in all of their legs when lying on their stomachs. He lifted his head and let out a big yawn showcasing his many chipped teeth. He was a street cat before ending up at the shelter, so he had a few scars. Chipped teeth and cut-up ears from fighting other cats. Though he looks battle-worn, he's never shown an ounce of aggression. Even when getting shots at the vet, he's calm, happy actually, purring the whole time. In fact, he often purrs away just sitting next to me. He seems happy enough just being inside with a constant flow of food and attention. After setting my school stuff down, I got ready to go bowling with some friends. It was mostly heavy drinking with a side of bowling. A few hours later, I was completely sloshed and Ubered home. It took me about 15 minutes for me to get up all 3 flights of stairs, only stumbling a few times. I finally reached my apartment and went inside. I drunkenly got ready for bed after setting a couple alarms to remind me of a few online auctions for some TCG cards that I didn't want to miss out on. Tomorrow was Saturday. Thank God I don't have to get up in the morning, I said to myself in a garbled tone. I made the desperate crawl into my bed and I felt Whale land on the bed full force. He came and laid next to me as I quickly drifted off to sleep. I woke up to an alarm and I quickly rolled over in a daze towards my nightstand to grab my phone and turn it off. It was an alarm I must have set last night for an auction, but I couldn't remember which one. And I honestly didn't care because my head felt like a cracked coconut. I rolled back over and that's when I noticed something peculiar. My front door was open. Again, having my bed in the living room gives me much more space, but it also means that I slept about 2 feet away from the only entrance to my apartment and it was wide open. What the hell? I asked sleepily as I got up out of bed. I went to shut it and I realized that the deadbolt was protruding from the side of the door. I immediately figured that in my drunken stupor last night, I must have not fully closed my door before flipping the deadbolt over to lock it. I properly closed it this time and then looked around my apartment for Whale. I was guessing that he was already exploring the apartment building and had pawed open the door, causing it to be fully open, but it didn't hurt to look around first. I checked his usual hiding spots under the bed, in the cabinet under the bathroom sink, and in what is supposed to be the bedroom but was now more of a PC/schoolwork room. No dice. I walked out of my apartment and started checking the hallway. He wasn't on my floor. I wasn't too worried though because the building had a main door to get in and out, so he had to be in the complex still. I checked the second floor and still didn't find him. There is also a pet policy at this apartment that doesn't allow any pets, but almost no one follows that rule since the landlord rarely comes around. Regardless, I was hoping nobody saw my cat wandering around the building. I got to the first floor and there he was sitting and staring at the main door. Whale, I quietly called out to him as I approached. He didn't seem to notice me, continuing to stare outside. I don't think he even realized I was there until I picked him up. He started purring as I brought him back up to the apartment. It was as if I was holding a revving Harley. After setting him on the bed, I went to close my door. Just as I closed it, I think I saw a face. No body, just a face at about eye level. I wasn't even sure if I had seen anything. A flash of something round across the hallway from my door. I could only compare it to the little silhouettes you might see in your vision after looking away from a bright light. I chalked it up to some kind of light reflecting from the hallway window and shut my door. A few more days have passed, not really worth mentioning. Just a mix of classes, work, and studying. Tonight I plan to just do more of the same, studying on my PC. After a few hours of reading about the social and economic conditions of America in the 1800s, I was resisting the urge to headbutt a pencil. I decided I'd call it a night. I turned off my PC and watched the screen go from blue then cut to black. The second it turned black, I saw another face. Only for a second. Not even that long. I know I saw it though. It was right there. Actually, it wasn't, it looked more like a reflection. A reflection that was perched just above my right shoulder from where I was sitting. I spun around fast enough to give myself whiplash. Nothing. Am I hallucinating? I didn't know what to do. What was that? Confused, I walked out into the living, turned on the TV, and sat on the couch. I was trying to distract myself from thinking about what I saw when I noticed Whale. He was standing on a couch cushion with his hind legs and had his front paws resting on the windowsill. He often does this, just patrolling the area, I guess. Keeping the neighborhood safe, big man? I directed him. The hairs on his back shot up as he let out a low groan. It scared the shit out of me at first because I had never seen him act like this. His ears folded down onto his head, flat as a table. He kept letting out this low, furious groan. I got up to look out the window and peered down towards the ground where he was staring. I saw nothing. I closed the blinds and he stopped. He hopped down from the couch and up onto the bed. After watching YouTube for about another hour, I got into bed. Whale was already asleep towards the foot of the bed, lightly sawing logs as he did. I scooted next to him and fell asleep. In the morning, I awoke to another uncanny sight. There's no way, I said aloud. I shot up in bed. My door was open. I know damn well that I shut it properly yesterday. There was no alcohol in my system last night to rationalize this with. I did not leave my door open. I got out of bed and already knew I would have to track down my cat again. He wasn't on any of the first 3 floors, so I took another set of stairs down to the subfloor. He wasn't there either. I heard scratching on a door somewhere on the floor above me. I went back up to the main level and there he was, scratching at the main door from the outside. He must have slipped out when somebody else left the building. It was cold out by now and I felt so bad that he was stuck outside. I opened the door and picked him up. He wasn't cold, so at least he hadn't been out there very long. I brought him back to the apartment and then got ready for classes. After class, Sarah came home with me. Sarah was a girl in my chemistry class that I had been talking to for a little while over the summer. She'd been over a few times previously and had met Whale before. He never gave her much attention, but seemed fine with her. Today, Whale came right up to her and brushed against her leg in greeting. "Must have missed me, huh?" she said to him. "He's just hoping you'll give him food," I said jokingly. Sarah and I hadn't made ourselves an official couple, but we definitely enjoyed each other's company. We had some food delivered and then started watching a movie. We made it about 10 minutes into the movie before she put her hand on my thigh and said, "Do you wanna, smooth?" I replied to pick on her a little bit. She scoffed. Sarah leaned in to kiss me as the movie quickly became background noise. As we were fooling around, I swear I saw another face just briefly. I stopped. It didn't look the same as the previous face I've glimpsed. It looked like a woman's face, I think, and it was also closer when I saw it than the other. It had been right behind Sarah's head, almost peeking at me from behind her through Sarah's hair. Per usual, as soon as I registered it in my mind, it was gone. I still wasn't able to make out any specific characteristics of it. "Hey, are you okay?" Sarah asked in concern. "Why, yeah, I'm okay. I just got something in my eye, I think." I didn't want to ruin the moment over something I wasn't even sure I had actually seen. As we continued to fool around, I would occasionally look down towards the couch and see Whale perched on the back of it with his ears all the way down, not making any noise. I thought he was staring at us, but he seemed to be looking at me directly. I tried not to let it bother me, and I was now making a conscious effort to focus on the task at hand instead of the oddly judgmental cat. When we were done, we finished the movie and then Sarah had to leave. I was hoping she would stay the night, but I knew she had early classes in the morning. I was alone again. When I moved into this apartment, I enjoyed the noise of the city and the commotion of all my neighbors. Some might find it annoying, and at times my neighbors could be, but the noise made me feel less alone. Now though, I felt alone again, suddenly more aware of my surroundings and the shadowed areas of my apartment. Before going to bed, I slid a box of books I still hadn't unpacked in front of the door. I'm not tracking down my cat again because my door magically opens when it wants to. Maybe I started sleepwalking. I'd never sleepwalked before, but how would I know now that I'm living alone? I then got into bed and went to sleep. At around 2 a.m., I woke up with an uncomfortable warm feeling in my stomach. I knew what this meant. The Taco Bell I ordered earlier came back to haunt me. I made a sleepy stride to the bathroom. I was glad Sarah wasn't here to listen to the intestinal war crimes I was experiencing. As I was in there punishing porcelain, I heard a harsh scratch on the bathroom door. It made me jump. Whale would scratch at the door now and then when I had the bathroom door closed. This sounded like there was anger behind it though, like he was pissed at me for some reason. He scratched again. I don't know why, but I felt kind of afraid. I was in a pretty compromising situation to be dealing with anything. Another few scratches at the door. The scratches weren't stopping. He was scratching so violently that the door was shaking in its frame. I tried not to make a sound. It was getting so loud that I was worried my next door neighbor was going to come knock on my door. I finished my business as fast as I could and threw the bathroom door open. As I had twisted the doorknob, the scratching stopped. I looked at the ground before me, and Whale wasn't there. I checked the outer side of the door and there were no scratch marks. Did I imagine the whole thing? After settling myself mentally, I went back to my bed. Whale was laying at the foot of the bed asleep. "Is this what food poisoning is?" I said in my head. Exhausted and confused, I fell back asleep. I woke up again later choking for air. I opened my eyes and all I could see was black. I felt fur in my face and in my mouth. My fat-ass cat was fucking suffocating me. I tried to move him and he wouldn't budge. 13 pounds now felt like 13 tons. I still was staring into darkness as my chest felt heavier and heavier from the lack of oxygen. The darkness was suddenly broken by 2 orange and yellow orbs peering back at me. No, through me. "Get the fuck off of me," I said, finally managing to roll him off my face as light flooded my vision. It was early morning and the light coming from the window was harsh on my eyes. I sat up as fast as I could against my headboard and just squinted at him while my eyes adjusted to the light. I was pissed off and terrified. He didn't look back at me and hopped off of the bed. Did he mean to do that? I wondered. Nothing like this had ever happened before. As I went to feed him before leaving for classes, I examined him more closely. Maybe I had grabbed a random cat off the street that was trying to get into our building. He sat patiently at my feet waiting for me to scoop his wet food into his bowl. He was as still as a statue while I looked at his ears. There were indeed little cuts. I went to check his teeth. I put my finger against his mouth gently and raised his upper lip. He didn't seem bothered by my prodding and was keeping eye contact with me the whole time, which was off-putting. Yep, there were definitely pieces of his teeth missing. It was him. I put his food down for him to eat, and for a second, he didn't move and just kept looking at me. It was only a moment or two longer than what would have felt natural for him, but it was notable. I went to leave for classes when I noticed that I couldn't see my doorknob. "You've got to be kidding me," I said aloud. I was getting a migraine. I knew I had to skip classes and I called out of work before it got worse. I used to get these migraines much more frequently in high school, a few times a month. Now though, I would only get maybe 2 a year, but these things are debilitating. It usually starts with a lapse in my vision. An example is if I hold my hand out in front of my face, a couple of my fingers will seem to be missing. They're still there obviously, but all I can see in their place is a swirling, distracting rift in my vision even if I close my eyes. This is followed by numbness in my mouth, tongue, and sometimes one of my hands. The back of my neck will ache unbearably and the nausea usually sets in soon after. They normally don't go away until I finally vomit a few times. It's like my brain is resetting itself. During this, every one of my senses feels like an affront to God. Nothing tastes good, feels good, smells good, and any bright light feels as if it's melting my brain. Sometimes I get lucky and they only last about 30 minutes, but I've had them last 8 hours before. It had been a long time since my last one, so I figured I was in it for the long haul. I texted Sarah that I wouldn't be in chemistry today, which took a while because I couldn't look directly at my keyboard. I had to use my peripheral vision in order to type the right letters. It takes so long to type anything in that condition. I got a glass of water, curled up on the couch, and tried to fall asleep before the worst of it set in. Meow, meow. I heard 2 perfect cat meows just a few moments later. I hated even hearing the noise. Meow. I sat up in my agony and looked around for Whale. I could see his tail flopping on the bed. I couldn't see the rest of him because of my migraine, but he was there. I heard another meow. This time it was far behind me. Meow, meow, meow. More perfect meows seemingly coming from my PC room. I was so fed up with the noise that I decided to get up and try to investigate. My vision was definitely worsening, which was not helping my efforts, and all the other symptoms were now in full force. There was light coming into my PC room from the window there. I had to squint in order to not fry my retinas. I heard another piercing meow. It sounded like it was coming from directly in front of me, but as far as I could tell there wasn't anything there. I stood there for a few minutes waiting to hear it again, but it never returned. By this point, my mouth was gradually starting to fill with saliva. I knew the inevitable toilet bowl hugging was near. I turned to leave my PC room and head to the bathroom when I stopped in my tracks. My abrupt stop almost made me throw up right there, but vomiting wasn't even on my mind now. In the doorway, I saw another face about 2 feet away from me. Only this time, it didn't disappear. Up until now, These faces would appear and fade away again faster than I could blink. I couldn't fully see it, as the swirling rift in my vision was twirling like crazy, but I could make out the shape. Cheekbones, a jawline, and hair at the edge of my vision impediment. From what I could see, it had dark short hair, pale skin, and a fairly bony structure. I looked away from it slightly to try and get it into my peripheral. It had eyes that appeared to be larger than they should have been for a person. Not balloon-sized, but closer to golf balls. I couldn't see what color, but they were definitely dark. It was a man's face with a sad expression. Frowning like it had just seen the saddest thing in its entire existence. Then, it started moving in closer, bobbing up and down as if the rest of its body was there too and I just couldn't see it. Not a single sound came from its motion. Fear would have been a welcome emotion in that moment compared to what I was feeling. Fear was part of it, but also pain, nausea, frustration, and desperation. I wanted to back into a corner and cower. I wanted to cry, to vomit. I wanted to shout at it. I was so done with this entire experience. In my mind, I said, if I gotta eat shit, I guess it's best not to nibble. I swung my fist at it. Pain shot up my arm through my hand like an electric eel. I had hit the door frame. It didn't feel broken at least, and the face was gone. My stomach decided that was enough movement and my mouth filled with saliva again. I made a mad dash towards the bathroom, more of a pitiful stupor, bouncing off of the walls that I could barely see in front of me. As I ran into the bathroom, I slammed the door behind me and locked it. I hovered over the toilet and my system purged. After 5 or 6 retches, I passed out on the bathroom floor. I woke up maybe an hour later. I didn't really know how long I was unconscious, but it was still light out. I guessed it was mid-afternoon. I stood up slowly and looked out the bathroom window. It was snowing gently outside. My neck still hurt, but every other symptom was gone. One thing about the migraines I get, afterwards I usually feel almost physically euphoric. If it wasn't always for the residual neck pain, I could run a marathon. I turned to leave my bathroom and I saw the door fully open. I didn't even care at this point. Hell, I felt like sarcastically saying, "Thanks for opening the door for me, whatever you are." I got some more water and a granola bar to slowly refill my now emptied stomach. I sat on the couch and looked over at the bed. Whale was there, sleeping on my pillow. I just stayed there for probably another hour, watching the snow fall outside the living room window. It was calming, grounding even. A blaring sound flooded my head that sent me reeling. My phone screen was on. It was one of my damn auction alarms. I checked it just quickly enough to see that I was way too poor to be spending that much money on some cardboard cards. Once my head stopped ringing, I figured I would put a little effort into solving the source of the meowing, since it was certainly not Whale earlier. As I left my apartment, I glanced over at my cat. He lifted his head just enough to shoot me an annoyed look. "Oh, did I wake you?" I mocked. I went to my next door neighbor and asked if she had a cat. I tried to assure her that I wasn't some cat narc, but I don't know how much that helped. She said she didn't have a cat, so I went to the apartment below mine to ask them. The man said he didn't have a cat either, so I was out of luck for any rational explanation. I'm sure my appearance didn't help. Messed up hair, color-drained face from vomiting, and a clearly bruised hand. I figured my efforts were futile, so I went back to my apartment and iced my hand. I wasn't sleeping tonight. Tomorrow was Saturday again, and I didn't have any plans. I just wanted to get to tomorrow and then maybe figure out some kind of solution. It's not like I could afford to move again. It was dark out now, almost midnight. I had YouTube on in the background, but I wasn't paying attention. I mostly just put it on so that if I heard any meows, I could chalk it up to an ad as I scrolled on my phone to stay awake. I was fully sucked into TikTok when my TV turned off. I forgot that it has an automatic shut-off timer, and it had been a long time since I pushed any buttons. Darkness enveloped my apartment. The only light has been coming from my TV and my phone. I knew the TV remote was somewhere on my couch. I got up out of bed to go get it after turning on my phone's flashlight. My eyes were still adjusting to the darkness, so as I hovered over my couch, I put a hand on the back of it and pointed my flashlight at the cushion. The remote was right where I left it. As I grabbed it, I felt a wet sensation go across my hand that was still on the back of the couch for balance. something wet and rough like sandpaper. I instantly pulled my hand away. I thought it was my cat. I wish it was. There was a face leering at me from behind the couch. This one didn't fade away. It was a child's face. A boy, I think, with a depressingly sad frown on its face. It was looking up at me with eyes of desperation. Those eyes, they were totally black. Not a drop of white anywhere in them. These eyes were golf ball sized as well. Its frowning mouth very slightly began to open, almost as if to cry. There was no crying noise though, just a quiet meow. This didn't sound like the perfect cat meows I had heard previously though. More like what would be expected from the face that was staring at me. Like a sad child being forced to say meow in a choked up tone. My hands were shaking. I dropped my phone. Dropped my phone. My only light source now swallowed up between couch cushions. I frantically plunged my hands into the cushion crevice. Meow, I heard again. It was even closer this time. Meow, right behind my ear. I found my phone and pointed my light where the sound came from. There was no face anymore. WH, what the fuck? I muttered just barely loud enough for myself to hear. Did that thing just lick me? I turned the TV on again and sat on the bed. Whale was nowhere to be seen at the moment. I was hoping for some kind of comfort, but I wasn't about to go walking through the apartment looking for him. I put on a movie and sat up in bed watching it. Not long later, my head felt heavy and my eyelids kept lowering like a garage door. A few minutes of hopeless head bobbing, and I fell asleep. I began to dream. It was like none other I had experienced before. It was very vivid. The dream took place in my apartment. The point of view was from the perspective of myself laying in bed. I stayed put, continuing to scan the room. To the left of the bed, a little ways away from the door, I noticed something that I couldn't recognize at first. There was a man standing next to the bed. He was staring at me. His face was different from the faces that had been haunting me though. Short blonde well-kept hair with regular human eyes that were a yellowish-orange color. His mouth showed no expression. He looked rather generic, very tall though. Had to be about 6 feet 5 inches and was very scrawny. Like his skin was vacuum sealed onto a bone frame. He wasn't wearing any clothes but appeared featureless from the waist down. His right arm was extended with a punitive finger towards me. I didn't move. The man's mouth opened just enough to let noise escape. He kept making that noise as his bottom jaw lowered and the sound grew gradually louder, going up and down in pitch and tone. At this point, his bottom jaw dropped lower than any person's possibly could. His chin was now down to the middle of his chest. Whip, a sound resembling what you might hear when trying to whip a friend with a wet rag but miss your target. The man's lips receded back into his body, exposing his teeth. The teeth themselves were normal but now separated. There were huge gaps in between each tooth on his lower jaw due to the stretching. "Oh," he continued. He stopped pointing at me with his right hand and clasped his hands together with a soft clap. Using his right hand, he started to twist his left wrist. Twisting and twisting. I could see the skin around his elbow start to buckle and tear. The man continued his vocalizations as he separated his elbow from its socket. Sounded like a large carrot being snapped in half. Dark blood began to flow from the jagged stump. I turned to look away. "LOK at me." It boomed in a deep voice, deeper than the lowest pit of hell. My head snapped back and held his gaze as he took the now severed arm and placed it against his stomach. The sharp ends of the ulna and radius were jutting from what little muscle and skin were on the arm. I watched as he dragged the bone fragments across his stomach like scissors flowing through wrapping paper. Blood and guts began to spill out into the ground with various squishes and plops. He tossed his amputated arm and hit the wall behind me, but I still didn't dare move. He raised his remaining arm up to his mouth. Kak, jelch, onge. He was plunging as much of his arm as he physically could down his throat. The sound of wet macaroni and cheese being stirred filled my ears. I watched as more dark blood and organs escaped the gash on his stomach. Hack, rock. It sounded like he was dry heaving. Then, I saw fingernails beginning to protrude from the hole. They inched their way further and rotated enough to grab the top section of skin and flesh atop the slash. He began pulling upwards on it as if to turn himself inside out. At that moment, the point of view of my dream changed. I was now looking at myself laying in bed. I had tears running down my face, but I wasn't blinking or making a sound. My new perspective got lower and lower to the ground. I could still hear the previous events I just witnessed unfolding. More squishes, retches, and flops. "I'll let you wake up now before I change my mind," I heard a voice say in a similar tone as before, calm yet stern. I shot straight up in my bed. Sweating so profusely I thought I had somehow spilled water all over myself. I was hyperventilating as I wiped stinging sweat from my eyes. It took me a moment to process what I had just dreamt. I looked to where I had seen the man standing. There was no man, but instead Whale, sitting motionless, staring at me. I let myself fall back onto my pillow while I tried to catch my breath. I felt the bed jolt as Whale hopped onto the bed. I wiped more sweat from my eyes just in time to witness him dead sprint from the edge of my bed and onto my chest. He sat down perfectly as if he'd practiced how to properly perch like a cat. I froze. He looked at me with his piercing eyes. He wasn't purring or making any sound at all. He started flopping his tail from left to right. Flop, flop, flop. His eyes seemed to be losing color, but also getting slightly larger. The rate of his tail flopping increased and he moved a tiny bit closer to my face. Flop, flop, flop. His eyes grew larger still and were now completely devoid of any light. Flop, 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 flop. His tail kept going at this constant speed like a pendulum. I couldn't move. I couldn't blink. I didn't even feel like I was breathing. He had me in some kind of hypnosis. He was so close now that I felt his whiskers on my face. I could barely see any of his head at this point, just his bulbous eyes. I was staring into the abyss and the abyss was upon me. After a short moment, I thought I saw a flicker of light somewhere deep within. Like the message cube in a magic 8-ball after you shake it and look into the viewing window for the answer to your question. Finally, I saw my mother within it. She looked distraught and tired, like she had been running from something or someone. Everything around her was blacked out, but she was interacting with her environment that I couldn't see, clamoring over obstacles. Then, something hit her in the head, right in the face. Her whole skull bounced off of what was presumably a wall behind her after being struck. She dropped to the ground. Her nose was flattened and flowing like a faucet with blood. She looked upwards at what I guessed was her attacker, but she was looking right at me. Another blow to the head and teeth went flying. She was still alive though, sputtering and choking on her own blood and tooth fragments. Another blow to her head, and I saw the light in her slightly popped-out eyes fade away. She was dead. There was still blow after blow as the image faded out. I still couldn't move. Another spark of light within the cat's eyes. This time I saw myself. I was hanging upside down by my feet and was half naked. Like in the last image, all background imagery was blacked out. The skin on my arms had been peeled down to my wrists very surgically. The flaps of skin were hanging on just barely. I watched as something struck my throat and crumpled my trachea. I saw myself struggling to bring in air, but it quickly was nothing more than a death rattle. The display faded to black again. Another spark, this time it was Sarah. She was hanging from chains connected to all 4 limbs, suspected horizontally, probably just off the ground. I watched in utter horror as she was... I won't describe Sarah's. That image couldn't have faded fast enough. I was trying so hard to move anything at all. I had never experienced sleep paralysis, but if this is what it's like, hell couldn't be far off. Another spark of light started up, but I was able to slightly make my eyes quiver away just barely. This hypnotic trance of tail flopping was impossible to break. It demanded all of my focus and attention. It must have noticed my eyes wavering. "If you look away now, you will damn them all." It was the same voice as before, but it sounded echoey and the volume raised and dropped as it spoke. "Look away now, and you're mine for eternity, my pet, my face, mine. Their suffering will be your suffering, and I'll be sure to let them know where to place the blame." The cat moved close enough to my face for me to feel its wet nose against mine. Beep, 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 an auction alarm. The noise broke my hopeless trance as I whipped my head towards my phone. What I did next is going to sound cruel, but I acted before I could even process what I was doing. I grabbed him. I held it so tightly against my chest that I could feel bones in this little cat body shift and move out of place. I stood with him still pinned to my chest. His giant eyes pressed against me like water balloons. It let out a loud shriek. It was a mix of human and feline sound. I took one single bound towards my window, opened it, and threw him as hard as I could down towards the ground. From 3 floors up, I heard every bone in his body snap and crunch. He laid flat, not moving, with his legs bent in various directions and a twisted spine. I turned off my alarm that was still going as I watched. I didn't know what to expect. The body started twitching and shifting. I watched as whatever it was slither off like a snake through an inch of fresh snow. I didn't take my eyes off of it until it disappeared into the distance. I just stood there with the window open for what felt like an hour. After I came to, I called my mom. It was about 3:30 a.m., but she works a night shift and I figured she'd be awake. After a few long agonizing rings, the line clicked. "Hi, honey," she answered. It took everything not to break down crying at the sound of her voice. "Hello." "Hi, Mom. Sorry. I was just up late working on some school stuff and wanted to check in." I couldn't tell her what had just happened. What would I even say? "Hey, Mom. My cat went fucking insane and there's been faces haunting me." "Oh yeah, and I saw you get beat to death." She told me about her job working at the hospital and I told her about my classes and how they were going. We talked for about 20 minutes and then she had to go back to work. I texted Sarah. "Hey, are you up?" I got no reply but didn't give it too much thought as it was now almost 4 in the morning. I knew she liked to get up at 5 a.m. to go on a run, so I just sat in silence, in the dark of my apartment, and waited. An hour later, my phone buzzed. "You're up early," she replied. "Up late, actually. I'm getting ready for my run, but we should get lunch today." We set a time for lunch and by now the sun was coming up. The warmth of the sun's rays never felt so comforting. I decided to put on pants, shoes, and a coat to go on a drive around the city to clear my head. I didn't want to be in that apartment, at least for a little while. I walked downstairs and out of the main entrance door. I looked below my window and I could see the serpentine trail in the snow left by that thing. I took a picture of it. I knew this wouldn't really serve as concrete evidence if I ever told anyone what happened, but it was evidence enough for me. I didn't drive for very long. I was exhausted at this point, so I pulled into a grocery store parking lot, set an alarm for noon, and fell asleep. I didn't dream at all. I was honestly grateful for that. I awoke in my car to my alarm with enough time to make it to lunch with Sarah. We got lunch on campus and just talked. Well, she talked a lot. I mostly just nodded and smiled whenever it seemed appropriate. I was happy enough hearing her voice. All I heard was a sweet blah blah, blah blah blah. She went back to finish classes for the day and I headed home. I parked my car and walked to my building. I stopped in my tracks. A large black cat was sprawled out across the bottom step leading up to the door. He lifted his head up and saw me. I still didn't move. He lazily got up and trotted over to me and brushed against my leg. I was mortified until I heard a little squeak. Whale's little squeak. Something I hadn't heard in so very long. I knew then that this was my cat, my boy, my whale. If you've made it this far, then you're mostly caught up. I was left with so many questions. What was that thing? Why me? Was it bluffing when it said to not look away? Where had Whale gone that whole time? Sarah and I moved into our own apartment together a few years ago. Just me, her, and Whale. We haven't gotten any other pets. Whale has plenty enough heart for the both of us. After those events, he lived another 6 years. Nothing else supernatural ever happened. He lived a good life. Sarah and I made the hard decision to have him put down this morning. He was an old man now and had a lot of health complications that old cats do. It was one of the saddest experiences I've ever been through. I've been to funerals that were less sad. He purred away as the vet gave him the injection. He paid it no attention and just kept purring until his little engine stopped revving. It's been a sad day for Sarah and I. We've just been reminiscing about our little lard ass and looking through pictures of him. I write all this to tell you that a few minutes ago, I felt my cat jump on my bed,